Hey guys, welcome back to yall-itics. We're on the road, as always.
Sweating it out today a little bit.
We are, thanks to our fabulous producer, Michael McCardle, put us out here in the People's Republic of Plano. But no, we're outside in downtown Plano. You know what I like about this area? All the cool restaurants here.
Yeah.
The German place. What's the German place?
What's the name of the German place?
Jorg's Cafe Vienna.
Yeah, Jorg.
That's what it is.
Yes, Jorg's.
So Vienna.
Abisu across the street,
Yeah.
fantastic Japanese place, and of course Fillmore Pub that's hosting us out here too. So this is a happening place, very dense.
It is.
And residential.
And it has become known, and by the way, you all have done an amazing job here in downtown Plano of just, reinvigorating and pulling so much more life into this downtown square. And I'm saying that not to Whiteley. Let's introduce our guest.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, thanks a lot. We've been working hard on
this hidden guest. We got the Plano Director of Planning, Christina Day, here with us because we're talking about something that isn't just affecting Plano, but cities all across this state. And so thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
So this is a new state law that was passed last session, and this really affects affordability in Texas. It affects home prices. It affects property taxes too. It affects
rents.
City budgets. It affects rents. This affects a lot of things, but it's also having a specific impact on how cities plan for the future. So this is SB 840, Senate Bill 840 that was passed last year, and essentially says, correct me if I'm wrong here, Christina, but it essentially says that anywhere that's already zoned for commercial development, you can now have residential development, apartment complexes move into the same place without having to rezone any of that. Is that
multifamily?
Correct?
Yeah.
That's right. For certain cities, if you're in a county that's large enough and your city's large enough, those are the new rules.
And so lay it out, how big of a deal is this? Because some people might say, okay, well, what's the big deal? There's apartments around, restaurants all over the place. How big of a deal is this?
Well, I think to many communities it is a big deal because they have certain expectations of land use based on zoning, and people buy their property with that expectation that if they bought their house next to a retail shopping center, that it's going to be retail. Mm-hmm. And the idea that it could become a 45-foot apartment building someday is not what they expected. So just the change in expectations, I think, is why it's a big deal.
So you're the Director of Planning here in Plano, and I'm just curious about that end of the title there. How much harder has this made the work of planning? Because, I mean, this was one of those changes that wasn't just a minor tweak in the law when it came down from the state. I mean, this took away a lot of local control over these projects. It would seem like that just totally changed how you go about your job.
Right. I think it has a significant impact, not just on the planning side, but more significantly perhaps on the engineering side, because when you're planning your capital improvements, there is a significant difference between a retail shopping center, an office building, and a apartment complex, frankly, in flushing toilets, doing laundry. The water and wastewater impact, traffic impacts are very different. And so when communities are planned for a specific infrastructure and that changes very suddenly, it takes a lot of adjustment, and so that was one of our largest challenges.
I hadn't thought about the flushing toilets until right now, but that makes so much sense. So if you've got a building that's sitting right behind you here, and it's one business, it's a restaurant, it's got maybe 2, 3, 4, or 5 toilets. You put an apartment complex into that building,
yes,
and now you've got a whole different situation. And
that's
so,
right.
yeah, I never thought about the infrastructure that's required to deal with all that.
And for people who are listening to this and not watching it, the dart train's right next door to us here, so
Yes.
that's what the dinging is here. But that is a good point about the infrastructure here, the toilets. Yeah. So is the city having to completely rethink its infrastructure and going to have to make some improvements to sewer lines to water lines, et cetera?
That's correct. Our engineering department is undergoing a wastewater and water master plan right now, trying to really anticipate the impacts of SB 840 particularly. We've gone through new population projections, trying to understand what the impact might be to our land use.
And what does that look like?
How many more people will be here?
Right. We have projected an increase, and it's really in a range of what that might look like over time. And it's really, at this point, a educated guess, I want to say, because we don't really know at this point, but we know the impact can be significant and we need to prepare for the future. So trying to give the engineering department an idea of what this would look like if there were redevelopment and new development on the vacant land we have left. And Plano's not new to redevelopment. We have a lot of redevelopment that's come in, so we have a good way of kind of understanding what the capacity is.
But Christina, what is the estimated guess here on population projections with this new law, since people can put up a multifamily apartment complex anywhere there?
Right. I think we're looking at anywhere between a 50 and 100% increase in our population projections over time. So it is a substantial impact in the number of people that are coming into the community.
Wow. So just to be clear there, that's a 50 to 100% increase in your projections.
Yes,
so
in projected
let's say you were
impact.
projecting an extra 20,000 people over a certain amount of time. Now you would be projecting perhaps 40,000 additional people in that period of time.
That's right.
That's substantial. Right. I could see how you'd have to go back to the drawing board on a lot of things there.
Yes.
So let's talk about this law. It passed. It went into effect last year. We're not even at the full year mark of this thing being in place. What has been the difference so far? Because I spoke with a developer right as this was happening and just asked him, like, are you guys going to be like lining up? Is there going to be a whole group of people? And he said it's a big buzz. It's all the buzz right now among developers, but we might not see like a line outside the door, trying to get in. Have you guys been inundated though with I guess plans? Because it's not like, can you approve it? They don't even have to wait for you to approve it necessarily. It's just a sort of administrative process now.
Well, our plan approval is administrative, so people are still going through the plan approval process.
Have you been inundated?
But we have had a lot of interest. So since the bill passed, we have had 32 pre-application meetings for new multifamily. We've tracked 46 inquiries, so you can tell a lot of people have come in for formal actual pre-application.
On that, though. Is that normal?
No,
what would you normally see in that time period?
We might see in a year 10 or 15
so
multifamily.
You're saying 40-something instead of that?
Yes, it is a huge increase.
That's huge.
So we currently have 1,212 units that have been submitted. So that is substantially more than were in the process before. Last year we had 500 units.
Okay, so easily more than double what you had normally been dealing with.
Yes.
And this is in kind of a weird environment too for developers. We've got high interest rates, et cetera. Do you anticipate that that could grow even more as the environment becomes a little bit more conducive for them?
Yeah, I think that's just the SB 840 units that I'm talking about, not things that are other by right units that we have other places that people can build by right under the existing zoning. So I do think that given all this other interest, we anticipate other projects will come in once they get their financing or just manage to move forward. So I do anticipate more projects.
So if I've been living in Plano, do I expect that I'm going to, have more traffic in the next year, the next 2 years as these things come online? Because it's got to be hard for you all to get out in front of that and keep up with it.
I think in Plano we are constantly seeing more traffic. Just as the region grows, we will see more traffic.
Yeah.
Whether the impact of that from SB 840 is a great question that we continue to need to study, because having more units in the city is a different impact than having units outside the city where people driving through. So the city gets to capture that taxable value. People stay here. So you could argue it's a benefit to the city to have people living here and having shorter commutes. But I do think it does still increase traffic.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any way around that.
And nobody in Plano or anywhere else likes the traffic, but I'm curious about what you said about the capturing the additional property tax revenue here and the sales tax revenue that's going to come with this. Is that going to outweigh all the growing pains that it might take to get there?
I don't know that it does, but the question is just, it's a balance. If the growth is all the outside of the city, then what are the benefits to the community versus growth inside the city, where you potentially do get to capture some of the benefits. So I think you just have to weigh the cost and benefits.
Yeah, I want to go back to that line of questioning about this, being in effect now for not quite a full year. And when I was talking to that developer before, right after this had happened, I was like, okay, so now do you go into these offices where before, you're going through a lengthy process, you're going to council meetings, you're going before the zoning commission, but now, you can skip all of that. Do you just go in there and bam, throw down the plan and go, approve this because you have to, because, the law's on my side? And this developer said, no, we're definitely not going to do that because we have to work with these people every day. And even with this law, they can still make your life hard here and there and on the edges. And so we need to work with these cities. Are you getting that from developers, or have you gotten some folks who've just come in and thrown down the paper and said, stamp it and let's do this, I'm going to do it my way?
I think we're continuing to see the majority of people are very cooperative. So I think it's primarily the former, where people are working with us. They're trying to follow the city's regulations. I feel like we took a very moderate approach to the bill. I mean, our primary approach was looking at complying with the law, allowing people to build where the law required us to. So we are not trying to reject people's opportunity. So in that, we are allowing people to come and build by right, and have a cooperative attitude toward new development.
You say that and some people might go, well, of course you did. I mean, that's the law, whatever. But we did see some other cities racing before this law was passed to put in place some new regulations to see if they could undercut that law a little bit. But from your experience so far here in Plano anyway, you all have still had a real voice in shaping how these developments come about, even though the developer obviously has the right now to build it their way, but you're able to shape this process still.
I mean, not to the extent we're accustomed to. I want to just be clear about that.
Right.
Really since 2019, when the legislature took away cities' authority to regulate materials, I feel like it's been harder for us to get the quality of residential development that the community was largely accustomed to, because the minimum building code is not ideal, I want to say, when you're looking for long-term quality of a building product. There are small improvements you can make that are not necessarily costly, that make a big difference in the longevity of a product, but that's the law, and so we're going to follow it. And so I would love to go back to allowing the cities a little more local control and flexibility to encourage a higher quality product that is lasting. But if that's not an option for us, we will do the best we can to follow the community's vision while following the state's regulations.
Is Plano going to lobby for that in the legislature next year?
That is not on our legislative program, to my knowledge.
Not part of the priorities. So state lawmakers passed this SB 840 because they were saying that, listen, there was a patchwork of requirements all around the state. Nothing was uniform at all. Plus, we have the affordability issue. But lawmakers said that cities essentially made it too difficult, too expensive to put up new housing in the state. Were they right about that?
I can't really speak to what other cities required. I think in Plano, it was, I don't know that it was too challenging to put up new housing. I think that we have a limited amount of greenfield development left because we're so developed. I mean, we're less than 4% vacant land, so it may seem difficult to develop here to some people because we simply don't have very much land. Every time you come in to develop here, you're either looking at a small infill parcel most likely, or someplace that you're redeveloping. So that is very different than being an edge city or developing in Plano in 1980, where you had your pick of the farms, right?
Well, that makes you all even more
the cities, though,
targeted by this.
The cities made it too difficult for expansion and new housing in this state. And I know you only speak for Plano, but you see what's happening all across the state. Dallas is a complete mess and has been for years with approving permits. There's all, and that's a little separate from this, but there's all kinds of issues around the state. Has local control gotten too big and bulky in this situation?
You know, I don't know that I think every year the legislature makes it more complicated to regulate development because, in my experience, it used to be easier to go through a development process because the state law was less complicated. In responding to changes in state law that are intended to make things more development friendly, the process actually becomes more complicated.
When I was talking with that developer last year, he said that it used to be that he would spend a good chunk of money and go through a process that was about 2 years of dealing with zoning and with council, and not in Plano, but just in general, that it could go as much as 2 years if you were looking to do a multifamily project before you even had the approval to begin with the design and actually getting started on the project. So he's expecting that half the time is being cut out now because of SB 840, and he thinks it's going to bring about, more affordable housing for a lot of folks. I'm curious, though, since this has actually kicked in, you're getting inundated with these plans to build these multifamily complexes here. Are you also hearing from people who have lived here in Plano for a long time, or who have a business here, who are not happy about the way that that's going, and maybe are unaware that this is something where your hands are tied? I think you all put up notices, though, when something's approved because of this law.
Right, we did require that because the community has expressed concerns. Through our comprehensive planning process, we've had a lot of discussion about people's concerns about the community housing. That's been no secret for the last 10 years. That's a big point of discussion. And so the idea that these changes, as housing was going up, we wanted to make sure that people were aware that this was not a local issue, this was a state issue, so they didn't effectively feel betrayed because of the issues that have gone on here in the community.
That'll blow up the phone lines at City Hall for sure. And so you all put up a notice that says, hey, basically this is something we had to approve, it's a state law, it's called SB 840, nothing we can do to stop that.
That's right.
Do you think this in the end is going to lower home prices, is going to make Texas and Plano more affordable?
I think it could, just because simply of supply and demand. I don't know that it will be an immediate impact, but I think to really make a difference, it needs to be more broad, right? The idea of the carve out of 19 cities.
The large cities with populations of
the
more than
large
150,000.
cities, right?
Yeah.
Right now it's impacting 19 cities in the state, and I think that it will be hard to make a meaningful dent in the state with such a small impact on really the land area.
So do lawmakers need to expand this then?
My opinion is that it needs to be broader, it needs to be a broader application if it's really going to have an impact statewide.
And just to make sure I understand too, we spoke a moment ago about sewer lines and things like that. As this begins to unfold, and as these new units and new applications come online here for you guys, do you expect that the streets department's going to have to come in and tear up streets to put new water lines in, to have greater capacity for water and sewer and power, et cetera?
I think those are the conversations that we have to have with developers when they come in, because the infrastructure capacity has to exist. So that's the challenge to building in a developed community, right? So if you are adding 500 units and there's not adequate sewer capacity, that has to be retrofit, And so
And
either
taxpayers pay for that, or who pays for that?
those are the
Developer?
questions that we're asking, is who's participating and who's paying for this. Right now, our ordinance states that we do a development agreement and decide who pays for what based on the existing capacity in the area.
And is the law clear on this, though, or does the law leave some gray area?
The law, it allows communities to establish the standard, so it is really a local control issue within certain boundaries.
At least it allows it for now.
For now.
Never know. There may be another, change in the legislative session ahead. So, as we look at this, there's always unintended consequences that come from actions in the legislature. No matter if they, it looked like it was going to be this great idea, there's always something that happens. Have you seen, or would that fall into that unintended consequences bucket, or have you seen anything like that where you thought, I bet they didn't consider this when this law passed, but it's something we're going to have to deal with as we go forward with this law?
I think that Plano is in somewhat of a unique situation because we're so built out. Many of the other cities that this impacts, Dallas, Fort Worth, even McKinney, have more vacant land and more, I think, opportunity to have these infill projects. So we're a little bit unique. So our infrastructure issues may be more acute, broadly speaking, I want to say. So I'm not, but that's our biggest issue. In other communities, I really feel like statewide it's an equity issue from an economic development perspective.
Yeah.
I feel like it does potentially give communities that are 840 communities a advantage from an economic development perspective, because if you come to Plano, you don't necessarily have to go through a zoning process. Whereas you talked about the expense. In a neighboring community, you might have to go through an expensive zoning process. So if I'm looking at choosing to go here or go someplace else, those are real world dollars.
And one of the things that struck me with, as far as potential unintended consequences, I've seen anecdotally, at least anyway, that in some cases a city council will have a development that comes before it that doesn't fall under this. It's, maybe to build a bunch of shops, for instance, and they're more willing to go along with that and go, yes, we approve that, than perhaps they would have been before, because it's not just another multi-family housing complex, and that could happen. So they're more likely to go ahead and go, yeah, develop it for that, because, if we say no to that, it's very likely that it comes back and it's another apartment complex.
Yes, I think it does change the calculus when it comes to zoning, because for commercial property, because it's not just commercial, it's commercial or multifamily.
Yeah.
So it's a different consideration.
And Christina, what are your colleagues from the other 19 cities saying about this? Is everyone just trying to adapt to it, or do they have other ideas that they're trying to employ?
I think cities took a variety of approaches. Really, it was very as distinct as the development community, said that cities were taking different approaches. Well, cities took different approaches to 840
for SB 840.
too.
Yeah.
We were having conversations as people were trying to struggle with what to do with the legislation and how to implement things. And so there were and have been conversations early on. But clearly cities took very different approaches. Some were kind of early adopters. Some, have, been kind of taking a wait and see approach. So I think that is consistent, that cities kind of follow their own path.
Have you seen in some of these proposals that have been given to you some kind of creative ideas and that's an interesting way of, redeveloping that building? And I guess in a lot of these places you might have a building that has sat or been, not that productive and maybe been an eyesore for a while that can now be converted and changed into something that's viable. Have you seen that?
I think that's, if there's one thing that might surprise people that heard about this bill in the legislature, it is that the big kind of upfront part of this bill was about office conversion, and we have seen no office conversions, not even had a proposal for an office conversion. Wow. It's all multifamily development, straight multifamily.
Wow. And so considering that, is there a chance that SB 840 could just accelerate growth without solving affordability?
I think it is currently adding multifamily units to the ground, but I don't think it is solving any of the office market glut, if that was part of the initial pitch.
So office space is still available, but there's a lot of
and
new
empty
multifamily
in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Yes, so the kind of older office that it was intended to be part of the solution, we have not seen any of that.
That's interesting. And just following up on that whole affordability question Whiteley just asked, every time I see an apartment complex go up these days, it's always, quote unquote, luxury apartments. Is that what you're still seeing, or is someone coming in and going, hey, we want to build these affordable apartments?
We did not have any applications for our low-income process this year. So the tax credit process that the city runs. So I thought that was surprising given the level of interest in the SB 840.
Yeah.
So in other words, this was designed to make rent more affordable and to build a lot more units, but at least from where you're standing right now, nobody's applying to create those affordable units. We might be seeing more of these luxury apartments coming online.
That's what it appears to me. I was really surprised to see. I don't know whether it just opened up the market to more market rate and therefore the affordable units are getting squeezed out. I'm not sure, because I'm not working so much directly with the affordable developers. That's a different department, but I serve on that committee, and we didn't have any applications, which was really surprising to me, because I thought with the market opening up, it would provide more opportunities.
On the other end of it, there are people who will say, though, those new luxury apartments actually make the quote-unquote luxury apartments from 5 years ago go down in rent a little bit, because it sort of resets where the standard is, but we'll see.
I think that will take time, though. I mean, right now, we've got these 1,200 units in process, but then those still have to go through construction. So with time, that can work, but I don't know that that's a today's solution.
And lawmakers have incentivized luxury apartment developers to include some affordable housing in there. They get tax benefits from that. Are you not seeing any of those developments in Plano?
We have had low-income housing tax credit projects here, but just not in the last year since SB 840.
Here's the last question I have for you, Christina. 5 years, you've been here since 1998, is that right? In
That's
Plano?
correct.
You've seen a tremendous amount of growth here. But 5 years from now, what do you think Plano looks like with this new legislation?
I think we are more densely populated. That currently we have 39% of our housing stock is apartments, and I think that it just continues to increase.
How high does it go?
That is yet to be seen. I think the legislature, if the legislature makes changes, as it, I think, may well, because housing advocates continue to push for reform, that it's volatile, right? Because if the market's opened up to more communities, that will drive the value of the land here will be potentially less marketable. But right now, it really drives up the value of the Plano land for multifamily, because this is one of the 19 cities in Texas where you can do it by right.
Last thing I have for you is, as we look 5 years or 10 years down the road, I mean, to be fair, Plano was already sort of, really going all in on this sort of thing at Collin Creek Mall, the old Collin Creek Mall site, Willow Bend Mall site. We've seen these dead malls, and you all had already really started doing a lot of this mixed use, where you've got housing there, you've got retail, you can have businesses and so forth, and we had already seen that sort of transformation happening in those spots. Is there a chance that in 5 or 10 years we see more of those kinds of developments, where it's not just a bunch of multifamily, but you've got townhomes, you've got businesses springing up. You've got employment centers, retail, entertainment, etc., and it sort of remakes the city in some ways.
I don't know if there's as much motivation to do mixed use, because I think the motivation in that was often to get the apartments. That was kind of the incentive to do the mix. And so at least what we're seeing right now is people coming in and removing the commercial from their mixed use and retrofitting it with more apartments.
And that might have been the thing that people who already live nearby wanted. They want, they're looking forward to maybe more shops and businesses that come along with that development.
That's
because
right.
it makes their life more convenient, gives them more options, but you're seeing that actually go away.
That's exactly right.
Okay, I think we're done here, but can you hold up this map real quick
Of
for the
course.
people who are watching the podcast today? And this map is interesting. I'll hold the other side of it.
Yeah.
We'll cover up Whiteley. That makes it better.
Wheeler's going to spill
Sorry.
everything.
You know what? When I was a kid, I used to always spill my drink every single time we went out to eat.
That
Not
does
much has
surprise
changed.
me. Not surprising.
So we're covering up Whiteley here to show you a map of Plano. And if you could, Christina, can you just tell us everything that is colored in here is potentially affected by 840?
Yes, the white areas are generally our single-family residential zoning, and the colored areas are our commercial areas where you can now build multifamily by right.
That's a lot of areas.
It is. The hatched areas are planned developments where we just want to tell you that there might be other rules because there's a mix of zoning. So anyway, those are the standards. This map is available online for people who are interested, or you can reach out to the planning department. We can send it to you.
This law, though, really opened up a lot of space for developers to go in and do something different without having to go through a lot of process.
It's basically a third of the city.
Wow. Christina, good luck to you on this. I mean, geez, this is really seeing how the law impacts what's happening on the ground. Christina Days, the Director of Planning at Plano, been here for a few minutes, so you've seen a lot happen in that time. So good luck with this latest challenge.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in, being able to discuss this exciting issue.
And thank you for sweating it out with us out here on this very warm
You
June
call it
day.
exciting, though. Is it exciting? It's challenging, maybe, huh?
I think it is exciting because there's always something new going on here in the city of Plano.
You're one of those cup half full people, aren't you?
Christina,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Thank you.